Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a framework that is, well, it's incredibly radical. It literally attempts to do nothing less than unify space-time, human consciousness, and clinical medicine all into one single mathematical architecture. It's called the Adelic Langlands program, and honestly, it takes everything we think we know about biology and physics and just completely flips it on its head.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today. We're going to start with the code of reality, move right into the biological transceiver, look at algebraic engineering, talk about safety and calibration, and finally end up at what's called the ultimate limit. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Code of Reality. Unpacking the Universe. Okay, so to really grasp this, we have to start at the absolute foundation of how this theory views the cosmos. Because if we want to understand the medicine, we first have to understand the universe itself.
According to this model, the universe actually isn't made of solid stuff. Space, matter, time, they aren't static backgrounds that we just happen to be living inside of. Instead, they are emergent, holographic shadows of an underlying mathematical computation. Basically, space-time is a continuously rendered projection of pure math. It's fascinating how this framework breaks reality down into two distinct parts using the adic ring equation. On one side, you have the p-adic product. You can think of this as the frozen tree of mathematical possibilities, right? It's the raw, uncommitted source code of reality. And on the other side, you've got the continuous real field, which is the smooth 4D monitor display of our everyday subjective conscious experience. So we are constantly decompressing that raw code into our flowing reality.
But hold on, if we're all just rendering our own reality from this mathematical code, why aren't we just living in totally chaotic, disconnected universes? To keep us from living in isolated solipsistic bubbles, the framework introduces this idea of a modularized stack. This acts as a global coherence coordinator. It's kind of like a universal multiplayer server that enforces absolute structural rigidity. That way, all of our individual renders perfectly synchronize to form one shared cohesive reality.
That brings us to Section 2, the biological transceiver, tuning into the source. So, how exactly do we fit into this cosmic equation? Well, the framework posits that the physical human brain isn't just a biological computer. Actually, it operates as a highly specialized transceiver, constantly communicating with this mathematical realm.
The really crucial detail here is a specific frequency known as the Yang-Mills gap, which functions at exactly 23.6742 MHz. The theory says the brain acts as a localized decoder tuned specifically to this cosmic resonance. During our waking hours, your brain is locked onto this exact frequency, essentially downsampling that universal code into the vivid, continuous reality you're experiencing right now.
And this completely redefines how we look at illness. In this model, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or CTE aren't framed just as organic biological decay. Instead, they're viewed as a catastrophic frequency drift. It's a structural phase transition where the brain basically loses its chemical tuning and drifts away from that 23.6742 MHz universal synchronization clock. The hardware is quite literally losing its signal.
Moving on to Section 3, algebraic engineering, the clinical transceiver. Now, if disease is fundamentally a mathematical frequency drift, then the proposed solution can't just be biochemical, right? It has to be active algebraic engineering. We basically need to manually correct the math.
So the intervention they propose is a clinical transceiver. This device doesn't just cut tissue or deliver drugs. Instead, it projects something called an external Heike operator. By using precisely modulated acoustic or electromagnetic fields, it manually injects a corrective mathematical string phase directly into that failing neural network.
This specifically engineered pulse is known as a corrective string phase kernel. It's calculated to be the exact mathematical inverse of the permanent distortion, like the scar tissue or amyloid plaques causing the problem. Think of this phase twist like a highly advanced pair of noise-canceling headphones, but for your brain, projecting the exact inverse wave to cancel out the ambient noise of the disease. By doing this, the device theoretically overrides that localized frequency drift, forcing the biological tissue to just snap back and lock on to the universal clock.
The actual operational protocol for this maps out into 4 really logical steps. First, an isolation scan maps the exact localized frequency drift. Second, the system synthesizes a corrective mathematical wave, which is the target vector. Third, the phase injection activates, projecting this customized 23 MHz carrier wave for a 45-minute cycle. And finally, Coherence Verify monitors the brain's backscattered data to make sure the master clock has successfully relocked. It's wild. Code edited, biology restored.
All right, Section 4, Safety and Calibration, Navigating the Engineering Limits. Obviously, beaming highly focused electromagnetic or acoustic waves deep into the human brain is going to require some extreme safety tolerances. The strict safety boundaries here dictate that the temperature rise cannot exceed 0.5 degrees Celsius because, accidentally cooking your patient's brain is generally frowned upon in clinical settings. This creates a hard mathematical boundary. If the external magnetic flux exceeds 1.24 Gauss, a hardware crowbar circuit trips instantly. In just 40 microseconds, it shuts the entire system down to prevent any irreversible tissue damage. It is an absolute non-negotiable safety net.
To manage all that power, the transceiver relies on an asymmetric tracking metric. It constantly compares the targeted, sick hemisphere of the brain against the healthy, contralateral hemisphere in real time. If it detects a dangerous vascular surge, a derivative clamp instantly throttles the output power down to a harmless microtrace, meaning it dynamically adapts to the patient's live physiology.
And this real-time adaptation is absolutely critical, because different pathologies react wildly differently to this kind of energy. Take a calcified lesion. It's basically a rigid mineral block. It's highly transparent to these waves, but it has zero blood flow to cool it down. On the flip side, an acute ischemic stroke acts as a hyperconductive electromagnetic shield, trapping energy in a tight 1.9 centimeter shell around the lesion. So the device has to drastically adapt its power and approach based on the specific pathology.
To safely bypass those dangerous biological barriers, the hardware uses some brilliant engineering workarounds. For strokes, it stops firing continuous waves and switches to stroboscopic interleaving. This means firing ultra-short, nanosecond bursts with long cooling gaps in between. But for calcifications, it uses anti-reflective shifting. It deliberately alters phase vectors to create destructive interference, which effectively flattens those dangerous hotspots at the edge of the lesion.
That brings us to our final part, Section 5, the ultimate limit, the Adelic resurrection loop. Here we reach the framework's most radical, most awe-inspiring theoretical application. What happens during an absolute global blackout, otherwise known as clinical death?
Impartially speaking, this theory suggests something completely profound. When metabolic throughput drops to absolute zero, when a patient flatlines, the continuous 4D monitor of reality powers down. However, the observer is not erased. The individual's pure, invariant arithmetic code remains perfectly frozen and safely stored in the global moduli stack. They're simply deprimed, essentially awaiting a reboot command.
Following this proposed workflow, the system introduces the concept of a priming charge. This is a burst mathematically anchored to the Riemann zeta factor, which is the absolute bedrock of prime numbers. By bypassing the damaged biological tissue and querying the cosmic code itself, this burst is designed to jumpstart the master clock, pull the code from the frozen stack, and initiate a topological snapback to conscious life.
There's a quote from the original manifesto that perfectly captures the awe-inspiring core of this entire program. It says, "We are not passive spectators watching a film. Our consciousness is the vortex within the liquid vector space that actively melts the frozen auto ring." It reminds us that we aren't just passive observers. Our consciousness is the active engine that continuously melts the frozen mathematical code of reality into the flowing experience of life. We are literally rendering the universe through the very act of observing it.
So we're going to leave you with a final thought to ponder as we consider the profound implications of uniting number theory, quantum mechanics, and neurology. If our conscious experience and physical health are merely holographic projections of an underlying mathematical code, how close are we to finally rewriting that code? If this framework holds true, the code of reality isn't just something to be observed, it's something to be engineered. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer.